One split second, one wrong move, one camera that never stopped recording. These content creators chased the perfect shot, the ultimate challenge, the viral moment that would change everything, and it did, just not how they imagined. Their final videos became evidence, their last words echoing through footage that was never meant to end this way. It was August 7th, 2018, when a routine equipment demonstration turned fatal at a small machine shop in rural Wisconsin. Gideon Blake, a 31-year-old former automotive technician, had been running an online channel dedicated to testing tools and machinery under extreme conditions. His background in vehicle repair gave him confidence around heavy equipment, though he lacked formal certification in industrial machining. Blake was known among his small subscriber base for his methodical approach to testing, often spending hours setting up demonstrations to capture the precise moment when materials reached their breaking point. The shop where Blake filmed belonged to a local fabricator who allowed him to use the space after hours. The main attraction was a 20-ton hydraulic press, a workhorse machine that had been in service for over a decade. Blake had used it successfully in previous videos, compressing everything from aluminum cans to steel brackets. On this particular evening, Blake arrived alone to test a series of steel spacers. He positioned his camera on a tripod approximately 8 feet from the press, ensuring a clear view of the compression area. Wearing safety glasses and work gloves, he began his setup routine. The shop's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the work area, creating the stark lighting that would characterize the final recording. The press itself showed signs of wear. The guide rails that kept the upper plate aligned had developed play over years of use, allowing for slight lateral movement during operation. Blake, focused on his demonstration, placed a 3-inch steel spacer between the plates without accounting for the machine's mechanical tolerance or the spacer's uneven wear along one edge. He had performed similar tests dozens of times before, developing a routine confidence that masked the equipment's deteriorating condition. When Blake activated the press, the initial compression appeared normal. The spacer began to deform under the 40,000 pounds of force. However, as pressure increased, the worn guide rails allowed the upper plate to shift slightly off-center. This misalignment caused the spacer to torque sideways rather than compress uniformly. The steel spacer suddenly fractured along its uneven edge, releasing the stored compression energy and ejecting laterally at chest height as the misaligned plate slipped. It struck Blake in the sternum, driving inward and fracturing multiple ribs. The impact threw him backward approximately 6 feet, where he collapsed beyond the camera's view. The press continued its downward cycle under sustained foot pedal engagement, unaware that its operator was no longer standing. A co-worker discovered the scene roughly 45 minutes later. The hydraulic pump was still humming loudly, though the press had reached its mechanical limit and remained frozen at the bottom of its stroke. Blake was found motionless near the shop's rear wall. Emergency responders arrived within 12 minutes of the call, but could only confirm what the physical evidence suggested. The coroner determined that Blake died from blunt force trauma to the chest, with internal injuries consistent with high-velocity impact. State safety investigators examined the incident. Their report cited mechanical wear in the press's guide system as the primary factor, noting that regular maintenance could have prevented the misalignment. The shop's insurance company required immediate repairs before operations could resume. The camera had recorded the entire sequence in one uninterrupted take, capturing both the mechanical failure and its consequences. This footage became crucial evidence in determining the exact cause of the accident, providing investigators with a clear timeline of events that witness testimony alone could not have established. The video would later be used in safety training programs across the region. It was January 14, 2018, when 28-year-old Damon Frost arrived at a private shooting range in the Arizona desert. The former warehouse worker had been creating firearm demonstration videos for several months, building a modest following online, despite having no formal range safety training. Damon was known among his friends as methodical but overconfident, often dismissing safety protocols he considered excessive. His videos typically featured stress tests and unusual shooting scenarios that drew viewers seeking unconventional content. He had recently purchased new camera equipment to improve his production quality and planned to expand his channel's reach. That afternoon, he positioned his action camera just behind his right shoulder to capture what he planned as a routine steel target demonstration. The mounting angle would show both his shooting stance and the target's reaction to impact. He had arrived early to set up his equipment without interference from other shooters, spending nearly 20 minutes adjusting camera angles. The steel plate hung nearly perfectly perpendicular to the firing line, approximately 25 yards downrange. No ballistic shield separated Damon from the target area, and he had positioned himself directly in line with the steel surface rather than at an angle. The target measured roughly 12 inches in diameter and had been used extensively without proper maintenance, showing visible wear marks and small dents. The range operator, busy with other customers at the far end of the facility, had not inspected Damon's setup. The facility operated on an honor system for experienced shooters, assuming proper safety knowledge. Weekend traffic was typically light, with only 3 other shooters present that day. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Damon fired a single 5.56mm round from his rifle. The bullet struck the steel plate dead center, but the perpendicular angle created optimal conditions for a direct ricochet. A bullet jacket fragment deflected straight back toward the firing line at high velocity, traveling the 75-foot distance in milliseconds. The fragment struck Damon in the right side of his neck, penetrating a major blood vessel. He collapsed immediately as arterial bleeding began. The camera, still recording, captured his fall and the spreading pool of blood beneath him on the concrete shooting pad. His rifle fell safely to the ground beside him. Other shooters heard the unusual metallic impact and rushed to assist within seconds. The range operator secured Damon's firearm and called emergency services while attempting to control the bleeding with available first aid supplies. One witness, a retired paramedic, provided additional medical assistance using pressure bandages from the range's medical kit. Paramedics arrived within 18 minutes but found Damon had already lost consciousness from blood loss. He was pronounced dead at the scene despite resuscitation attempts lasting nearly 30 minutes. The responding team noted the significant blood loss had occurred too rapidly for effective intervention. The subsequent investigation determined that the ricochet resulted from the target's improper mounting angle. Steel targets require angled positioning to deflect fragments safely downward rather than back toward shooters. Range safety guidelines recommend a minimum 20-degree downward angle. The medical examiner determined the fragment had severed Damon's carotid artery, causing rapid exsanguination. His death was ruled accidental, attributed to negligent range setup and inadequate safety precautions. The recovered camera footage provided clear evidence of the sequence of events, showing how a routine demonstration became fatal due to a fundamental safety oversight that transformed controlled target practice into an uncontrolled ricochet scenario. It was April 17, 2017, when Lana Riggs entered a rail tunnel in rural Pennsylvania and set her smartphone on a small tripod near the tunnel wall. The tunnel cut through a wooded hillside and carried freight traffic several times a day. Lana, 24, worked part-time at a clothing store and had been building a small YouTube channel centered on timing and endurance challenges filmed in unusual locations. Friends described her as adventurous and willing to push limits for content, often choosing locations that felt visually dramatic without fully understanding the hazards involved. She had no experience with rail operations or industrial safety and relied mostly on online clips and assumptions when selecting filming sites. The tunnel stretched roughly 800 feet and offered little clearance. Along one side ran a narrow walkway, about 3 feet wide, layered with loose gravel that shifted easily underfoot. Warning signs were posted at both entrances, cautioning against unauthorized entry and the dangers of passing trains. Lana positioned her phone to capture both herself and the length of the tunnel behind her. The audio recorded distant mechanical noise echoing through the hillside, an approaching freight train still miles away. She spoke calmly to the camera, explaining her plan to time how long it took the train to pass completely through the tunnel, while she remained standing along the wall. Minutes later, the locomotive entered the tunnel at approximately 45 miles per hour. The confined space amplified the sound instantly. Air pressure surged ahead of the engine, creating a powerful wind that rushed past the narrow walkway. The ground vibrated as the first cars passed, and loose gravel began to slide beneath Lana's feet. The combination of noise, wind, and vibration made balance difficult. As the train closed the distance, visibility dropped and the air grew turbulent. Lana shifted her stance, trying to steady herself against the tunnel wall. Within seconds, the gravel rolled under her shoes. She stumbled sideways, and her shoulder made brief contact with the side of a passing rail car. The contact destabilized her completely. The movement pulled her into the train's dynamic envelope, the zone of overhang, sway, and turbulence created by successive cars moving at speed. As additional rail cars passed, the airflow and lateral motion prevented recovery. She was struck repeatedly by overhanging components and turbulence generated by the train's movement. The impacts caused fatal traumatic injuries almost immediately, though the train continued forward uninterrupted. Inside the locomotive, the engineer detected a possible trackside obstruction and initiated an emergency braking procedure. Automated systems registered irregularities as the train entered full emergency stop. Due to the weight and momentum of the freight cars, the train continued for more than a mile before coming to rest beyond the tunnel exit. Rail personnel contacted emergency services and walked back along the tracks toward the tunnel. Responders arrived roughly 25 minutes later and confirmed the fatality at the scene. The tunnel was closed to rail traffic for several hours while evidence was documented and recovered. Lana's smartphone was found intact near the tunnel wall. It had continued recording throughout the incident, capturing the audio of the approaching train, her spoken countdown, and the moment the sound abruptly cut off. The footage provided investigators with a clear timeline of events. The medical examiner ruled the death accidental, citing multiple traumatic injuries consistent with train impact. Unauthorized tunnel entry was identified as the primary contributing factor, along with unfamiliarity with railway safety conditions. The incident was later referenced internally to reinforce existing safety measures around restricted rail areas. The recovered recording served as a complete record of how a controlled filming challenge became fatal once a moving train entered an unforgiving environment. It was August 18, 2017, when 23-year-old Nora Cross decided to film another strength challenge at an abandoned factory in rural Illinois. The former art student had been creating fitness content for her YouTube channel for several months, documenting various endurance experiments in unconventional locations. Her videos typically featured makeshift obstacle courses and improvised equipment tests, attracting a small but dedicated following who appreciated her creative approach to physical challenges. Nora arrived at the facility with her filming companion, a college friend who handled camera work and safety spotting. The factory had been vacant for over a decade, its concrete floors littered with debris and remnants of industrial equipment. Among the scattered machinery sat a large industrial floor fan, approximately 4 feet in diameter, fitted with steel-reinforced blades, which had caught Nora's attention during a previous scouting visit. The plan involved testing her ability to maintain balance and forward progress against increasingly powerful airflow. Her companion had transported a portable generator capable of powering the industrial fan, which they positioned roughly 15 feet from a marked starting line. The fan's original safety guard had been removed years earlier, likely during the facility's decommissioning process. Nora wore her typical workout attire: athletic pants, running shoes, and a loose-fitting windbreaker jacket. The shoulder-mounted action camera captured her initial approach as she explained the challenge parameters. The generator hummed to life, and the massive fan blades began rotating, creating a steady stream of air across the concrete floor. Her first attempts went smoothly. She leaned into the airflow, maintaining her footing while the wind pushed against her body. The loose jacket flapped dramatically, but remained manageable. Encouraged by her initial success, Nora moved closer to increasing the difficulty. As she moved closer to the fan housing, the airflow intensified significantly. Her jacket sleeve was pulled forward by the current and made contact with the exposed rotating assembly, becoming entangled within seconds. The mechanical force immediately pulled her upper body toward the fan housing. Her companion, positioned behind the camera, witnessed the sudden entanglement but was too far away to intervene. As the sleeve caught, the rotating assembly violently pulled her forward. She was struck by the rotating components, suffering severe blunt force and crushing injuries as the motor slowed and stalled under the load. The companion immediately shut off the generator and contacted emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 20 minutes, but Nora had already succumbed to her injuries. The responding officers documented the scene, noting the removed safety guard and the victim's entangled clothing. The medical examiner attributed the death to blunt force trauma sustained during mechanical entanglement and direct impact with the rotating components. Investigators concluded that the industrial fan's missing safety equipment, combined with loose clothing, created the fatal hazard. The recovered camera footage provided clear documentation of the incident sequence, confirming that the entanglement occurred rapidly and without warning. The abandoned factory was subsequently secured by local authorities, and the remaining industrial equipment was removed to prevent similar accidents. The incident was later referenced internally in safety guidance regarding abandoned industrial sites and equipment hazards. The case was later used as a safety example during internal responder training. It was April 28, 2018, when 26-year-old Silas Vane arrived at a construction site in rural Georgia with his camera equipment and a plan that would prove fatal. Silas worked intermittent labor jobs around the southeast, picking up shifts in warehouses and construction sites when he needed quick cash. What drove him more than steady employment was his growing YouTube channel, where he documented increasingly dangerous stunts and challenges for his online followers. Standing just over 6 feet tall, with an athletic build from years of physical work, Silas had developed a reputation among his peers as someone who would attempt almost anything for content. His channel focused on height-based challenges and balance tests, often performed in abandoned buildings or construction sites he accessed without permission. Despite his familiarity with construction equipment from previous jobs, Silas had never received formal certification for operating heavy machinery. Born and raised in a small town outside Atlanta, Silas had always been drawn to physical challenges and risk-taking behavior. His childhood friends recalled him climbing water towers and jumping from railroad bridges into creeks below. This tendency followed him into adulthood, where social media provided both an audience and financial incentive for increasingly dangerous activities. The site that day featured a boom lift extended near its maximum reach. Silas had convinced a friend to operate the ground controls while he performed what he called a balance test on the platform. Security footage from a nearby trailer later showed Silas climbing onto the platform without attaching the required safety harness to the anchor point. Weather conditions that afternoon included intermittent wind gusts, reaching 15 miles per hour, causing visible movement in loose materials around the construction area. The boom lift, a standard telescopic model commonly used for building maintenance, was positioned near the edge of what would become a multi-story office complex. The machine had passed its most recent safety inspection 3 weeks prior. His helmet-mounted camera captured the entire sequence. The extended boom exhibited slight movement in the wind, causing Silas to adjust his stance repeatedly. When his friend made a sudden corrective input at the ground controls, the extended boom shifted abruptly. Silas lost his footing and pitched forward over the safety rail. The footage shows him falling approximately 15 feet onto an exposed steel beam within the unfinished structure, followed by a secondary fall of roughly 45 feet to the concrete foundation below. The impact was immediate and severe. His friend shut down the lift and called emergency services, but responders found Silas unresponsive upon arrival. Emergency medical personnel arrived within 12 minutes of the call, but attempts at resuscitation proved unsuccessful. The medical examiner ruled the death accidental, citing blunt force trauma from the fall. Investigators determined that the incident involved unauthorized after-hours access and did not identify equipment malfunction as a contributing factor. His helmet camera, recovered intact, provided investigators with a complete record of the incident. The footage became key evidence in determining that equipment malfunction played no role in the accident. Work at the construction site resumed the following week, with enhanced security measures including additional fencing and warning signage. Silas's social media accounts, which had documented dozens of similar stunts, were eventually removed by his family. The case highlighted ongoing concerns about unauthorized access to construction sites and the risks associated with unsupervised equipment operation. It was June 30th, 2017, when 23-year-old Cora Madden drove to a cattle ranch in rural Nevada with her camera equipment and a dangerous misconception about electrical safety. Cora was a journalism student at a regional university, taking a summer break from her studies to focus on building a YouTube channel through educational content creation. Her channel specialized in testing common myths and safety assumptions, often involving everyday hazards that people encountered in rural and suburban settings. Standing 5 feet 4 inches with shoulder-length brown hair, Cora had grown up in suburban Las Vegas with limited exposure to agricultural environments. Her academic background had given her confidence in research and fact-checking, but she lacked practical experience with the equipment and systems she chose to investigate. Friends described her as methodical and curious, someone who approached problems with academic rigor. but sometimes overlooked practical safety considerations. The ranch property featured standard livestock fencing powered by a commercial electric fence system designed to contain cattle within designated grazing areas. These systems typically operate at voltages between 5,000 and 10,000 volts, delivering brief but powerful pulses designed to deter animals without causing permanent harm. Warning signs posted along the fence line clearly indicated the presence of electrical current. Morning conditions included heavy dew formation, creating moisture on metal surfaces throughout the property. Cora had arrived early to take advantage of optimal lighting conditions for filming. She wore cotton work gloves that had absorbed moisture from handling equipment in the humid morning air. Her tripod-mounted camera captured the entire incident from approximately 15 feet away. The footage shows Cora approaching the fence line and explaining her intention to test whether the electrical current posed a genuine danger. She gripped the wire with both hands, apparently expecting a brief shock that she could quickly release. The electrical pulse caused a sudden startle response and severe disorientation, triggering a reflexive recoil from the wire. The moisture in her gloves and the morning dew intensified the shock sensation, increasing disorientation during the brief contact. She collapsed forward after the shock, striking the ground while the fence continued its regular pulse cycle nearby. The ranch owner discovered the scene approximately 2 hours later, during routine morning rounds. He immediately shut off power to the fence system and contacted emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 25 minutes but found Cora had already succumbed to traumatic injuries sustained during the fall following the electrical shock. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as traumatic injury sustained during the fall, with the electrical shock identified as the triggering event. The electric fence system was found to be operating within normal parameters and posed no unusual danger when used as intended for livestock management. The incident was documented as an accidental death during filming activities. Investigators noted that the fencing system was operating within normal agricultural safety parameters. Cora's camera equipment, recovered intact, provided investigators with complete documentation of the circumstances leading to her death. The footage was later referenced in educational safety materials to demonstrate proper safety protocols around electric fencing systems. Her family requested that her social media accounts be preserved as educational resources, highlighting the importance of understanding electrical hazards in rural environments. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.